I grew up in a lot of different places when I was a kid. My family eventually moved to Maryland when I was 14 years old, and that's where I kind of feel like my home was, in Maryland. The first song that I remember having an impact on me, I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, and this was actually when I was living in Georgia, and there was a Steve Miller Band song, the one that says Philadelphia, Atlanta, LA. I forget what one that is. Keep On Rockin' Me by the Steve Miller Band.
There you go.
I just loved it because I lived in Atlanta, and I just absolutely loved it. And from then on, I was a fan of music. My earliest influences were Jimmy Page, Ritchie Blackmore, and Iron Maiden. Those would be my core influences from when I first started playing when I was 14. My parents were always supportive of me playing music and wanting to play guitar, but when I was growing up, my parents were not huge music listeners. I kind of figured it out on my own once I heard Steve Miller. When I was a younger teenager, I lived in Minnesota, and I wanted to take guitar lessons, but there was nowhere to take guitar lessons where I lived. So once we moved to Maryland when I was 14, my parents were cool enough to buy me a guitar and pay for my guitar lessons for 4 or 5 years. So they were always super supportive, even though they weren't personally huge music people. I started jamming with these guys actually in 1989 when I was 19 years old. And we had a couple different incarnations, and we finally settled on the name Cutch in 1991. So we've been going for a long time. Yeah, we've pretty much been writing songs together for almost 30 years. But like you said, ever since Earth Rocker, it seems like the band has been growing a bit more than we did in the past. I think a lot of that has to do with us putting out our own albums and, you know, learning how to promote the albums really before they come out. We had always been on other labels, and even though we experimented with putting out our own stuff back in the 90s with our album Jam Room, Strange Cousins from the West was really the first Cutch album that we ever released. So that was kind of like an experimental thing to see what happens. But once Earth Rocker came out, Psychic Warfare and the new one, you know, we just kind of got a little better at promotion and letting our fans know that we have a new album coming out. And with Facebook and social media, you know, we're in our mid-40s, pushing 50 now, so we kind of got on that train a little bit late. So when all these younger bands were doing that, we were kind of still, you know, on DRT records, still trying to do the label thing, and we just had no concept of how social media we could really reach our fans with that. So within the past 5 to 10 years, we've really kind of brought that around. Yeah, I mean, I was 28 years old before I even saw the internet, so there's that. Book of Bad Decisions, we recorded that one down in Nashville with Vance Powell, and you know, we worked on the songs from the time Psychic Warfare came out until the time we recorded them. We probably had more musical ideas than we've ever had for any of our albums. So it seems like the older we get, the more time and more song ideas that we have. We always just slowly kind of work on new material, and we try to play it live and practice the songs live and then ditch them and, you know, rewrite them and see what happens. But I feel like with this album, we probably had more writing time, or actual time where we were working on the songs together than any other album we've ever done before, which is probably why we ended up with a 15-song album. My view of the world with the music business, you know, it's just changed. It's different. You can't expect to sell a lot of records these days, you know? That's all there is to it. You got to play live and sell merch if you want to survive. As far as the world in general, I guess we're going to see, aren't we? As long as we don't get nuked, I'll be happy.